This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Coastal Hospice and Palliative Care.
For the most part, would you agree that most adults understand end of life? Of course, in many cases, death is simply very hard to digest, but we can process our feelings a whole lot better than kids can. The team at Coastal Hospice understands that, and that's why they've launched a grief support program in local schools. With us this afternoon, this is Howard Travers. He's the bereavement care manager at Coastal Hospice. This is Cheryl Torpey. She's the coordinator of a new program that we're learning about today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great,
Thank you for having us.
So let me ask you, I want to learn about this program, what you're doing with it. First, let's talk about how kids grieve.
Well, children grieve differently than adults. Adults may be forlorn and sad and teary, whereas children might have very intense grief reactions for, say, 5 minutes, and then they go off and play.
Yeah.
Children do grieve. They need the time and the space and the understanding to know that they're afraid. Children can be very egocentric in thinking, did I cause this? Or is this contagious? Is this going to happen to my other loved one? Am I going to be alone? How is this going to affect my future?
Is that something we can look for? Are there signs and symptoms that maybe a child is grieving?
Absolutely. As Cheryl said, children grieve differently than adults grieve. Oftentimes, children process their grief emotions differently than adults do. And oftentimes it's withdrawal. Many times they'll withdraw from family activities, they'll withdraw from social activities, from wanting to get involved in extracurricular activities, become more introspective, rather than wanting to be involved with others and becoming more quiet.
So what can we as parents do?
I believe as parents, reaching out to the support mechanisms in the community, and there are a number of support mechanisms that can help assist parents in helping their children work through those grief emotions. But also, Coastal Hospice is a resource in the community that parents can look to for support. And we have a number of resources that we'll talk about more today.
Okay, so tell us about the school-based program.
The school-based program is in its infancy. We realize that children have a need to grieve and to be understood, and a safe place to do that. Many times when the adults in a family are grieving, the children feel they don't have a place or a space to share their grief. They want to protect this, say, if a father dies, as an example. The child might not want to talk to their mother about feeling sad or confused or lonely or missing their father for fear it will upset their mother. So many times children are isolated in their grief.
Yeah.
There aren't people or structures in place to help them grieve. And that's why we recognize the problem, and we wanted to serve the children of families that are grieving as well as the adults.
So who do you think would be the perfect person to benefit from this program?
I think children, for one, right now we're doing groups, so they would have to be able to be a part of a group without the behavioral issues that might disrupt a group. And even with that, we can work with some of that. But children that have lost a loved one, children that might not have large family support, that they really are not connected with, you know, something in the community, whether it's an agency, a church, a mosque, a synagogue, whatever, where they're not connected. And they're isolated in their grief, because very few children, unless they've experienced loss, know how to comfort their peers.
Right. So is that why it's important to do this in a school setting?
It is, and oftentimes that's often where the behaviors are manifested. It's oftentimes the teacher is saying, you know, this is different behavior than, or it may be affecting the grades, and oftentimes it's the teacher who's reaching out to the parent or the care provider saying, there's something different, there's something going on that needs to be addressed here.
Yeah.
And our hope is that we can catch children that don't become at-risk children, that we can help them with the trauma of loss and work with them in a healthy way to normalize those intense feelings and emotions so that they can adjust to life without acting out, with drugs or running away or alcohol or whatever they can get into.
Yeah.
We want to kind of guide them through the process.
Wow, that's amazing. Howard Travers, Cheryl Torpy with Coastal Hospice, thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for
Some pretty
having
amazing
us.
things.